Imagine a time when cats were burned because they were considered allies of the devil, and in their absence, the real plague began to spread. Welcome to the Middle Ages, a time so strange and terrifying it will make you question everything you thought you knew about history. Think you've had a bad day? In the Middle Ages, hygiene was a distant dream. Bathing was considered dangerous because people thought it could open up your skin to evil spirits or disease. This meant whole villages went unwashed for months, sometimes years. Can you imagine the smell of sweat, rotting teeth, and filth wafting through crowded streets? Speaking of streets, these weren't just for walking, they were open sewers. Buckets of human waste were casually dumped out of windows, splashing onto anyone unlucky enough to be below. And then there were the rats. Big, fearless, disease-carrying rats that thrived in these conditions. They didn't just invade homes, they ruled the streets. It's no wonder the plague swept across Europe like wildfire, but here's a twist you probably didn't learn in school. It wasn't just the rats that spread the disease, it was something much closer to home. What if I told you the plague was hiding in plain sight? Stick around to learn about the real culprits behind history's deadliest pandemic. We all learned in school that the Crusades were religious wars fought for noble causes, right? But here's the brutal truth. They were anything but noble. Picture this. Knights, supposedly fighting for faith, slaughtering entire villages and stealing treasures along the way. Some crusaders, desperate for survival, even resorted to cannibalism. Yes, you heard that right. There are records of knights roasting the flesh of their fallen enemies just to stay alive. But the horrors didn't stop at the battlefield. The Crusades left a trail of destruction, destabilizing entire regions and claiming millions of lives. And here's the most unsettling part. The Crusades didn't just reshape history, they left behind wounds that still echo in modern geopolitics. But what was the true price of these wars? The answer might shake your understanding of the world today. Owning a black cat, knowing too much about herbs, or simply being too outspoken could mark you as a witch in medieval Europe. Accusations could come from anyone, a jealous neighbor, a spurned lover, or even a child. Once accused, you faced the most brutal forms of torture, thumbscrews, iron collars, or being tied to chairs and dunked in freezing water to prove your innocence. Spoiler alert, most didn't survive. Here's where it gets even darker. The witch hunts weren't just about superstition. They were a way for the powerful to control society, confiscate property, and silence dissent. It was a mass hysteria that turned entire communities against each other. But how did this madness finally end? And why did it happen in the first place? The truth is more complex than you think. You might complain about your 9-to-5, but at least you're not a gong farmer. These unfortunate souls were tasked with digging out human waste from cesspits, often waist-deep in sewage. And let's not forget the professional plague barriers, who hauled disease-ridden corpses day after day. How about a leech collector? They would wade into swamps and let blood-sucking leeches latch onto their legs, collecting them to sell to medieval doctors. Despite the horror, some of these jobs were surprisingly respected. Being a gong farmer, for example, was one of the better-paying professions for the lower classes. But the toll these jobs took on their bodies and their dignity was unimaginable. Think that's bad? Wait until you hear about the punishments medieval society used to enforce order. In the Middle Ages, the punishment always seemed to outweigh the crime. Forgery could get you boiled alive, while theft might earn you a one-way trip to the stocks, where passers-by pelted you with rotten food, or worse. But the most notorious punishments were reserved for those who challenged authority. Devices like the Iron Maiden, the Catherine Wheel, and the Scold's Bridle were designed not just to hurt, but to terrify anyone who witnessed their use. However, some of these punishments were less about justice and more about spectacle. Public executions became a form of medieval entertainment, drawing massive crowds. It's chilling to think how normalized this violence was to everyday people. But what does this say about human nature? And could it happen again? The answers will make you shiver. Despite the horrors of the Middle Ages, it wasn't all bad. In fact, some of the greatest advancements in art, science, and technology emerged during this time. The medieval period laid the groundwork for the Renaissance and even shaped the way our modern cities are built. But here's the kicker. The real lesson of the Middle Ages isn't just about their darkness, it's about resilience. It's a reminder of how far humanity can come, even from the bleakest of times. So knowing all this, could you survive in a time of plagues, superstition, and endless struggle? If you love exploring the darker side of history, don't miss what we've got coming next. There's always more to uncover.